Well, yeah, we might as well kick off then. So, yeah, thanks everybody for joining tonight's Greenlit U session, which is going to be a very, very special occasion with a very long-standing friend of Greenlit, somebody who's done a fantastic few years of work with the independent film community, and we'll talk all about what Katie and Festival Formula do in just a minute. So, for those of you that haven't joined us before, this is Greenlit U. You might be watching this live. You might be watching this on our YouTube channel or on one of our other channels. And Greenlit, we're the crowdfunding platform dedicated to creativity and creative people and creative projects. We started off just dealing with films. We also deal with music. We deal with theatre. And we have gaming projects coming through as well. So if you're looking to crowdfund, we're the first place you should be. Never mind Kickstarter, never mind Indiegogo, never mind those dull, commoditized, big American platforms. We are right here in the UK and we love creativity. We're all creative people. We thrive on creative projects and seeing what people come up with and what work they're doing and how creative people have something to say about the world. And our support goes a long way beyond just crowdfunding. For us, it's all about the community, and it's all about reaching out and speaking and building, a genuine relationship with people where we're right behind what you're doing. As I say, everybody on our team comes from a creative background, myself included. And we know what it's like to be trying to pull something together against the odds. And, we're there 100%. That's the Greenlit ethos. And if you have any questions, by all means, hit us up, the contact form on our website, or you can just email us. It's greenlit.com. I'm Pete, P-E-T-E. I'm the CEO and founder. Also on the meeting here tonight, we've got Grace, our head of community. She's Grace at greenlit.com. And Phil Melanson, our head of communications, Phil at greenlit.com. And listen, we're very friendly people. And we're very happy to help you in any way, whether that's funding related, marketing related. We love the community. And now we've kind of nailed down that ethos. Exactly as I was saying, it's a delight to welcome Katie McCullough from Festival Formula, who I know shares that ethos as well, thrives on creativity and creative people and helping those creative people. And I met Katie very, very early on. I believe her hair was green in those days, and very early on, I think either we'd just very launched, or if we were just in the process, and we've maintained that relationship going. She's got a fantastic team over at Festival Formula, and rather than me inexpertly describe what they do, I'm going to pass you over to Katie, who will explain. Take it away, Katie.
Thank you very much. What a lovely welcome. It's great to be here. We were just saying before everyone joined us from the waiting room about the amazing ability to be able to learn different parts of our industry digitally. So things like this it's amazing. It's nice to see a few familiar faces and names, which is great. But essentially, I've founded Festival Formula. It's actually 8 years old this month. But I have been doing festival strategy for 18 years. So seen lots of different changes. I have never seen a pandemic, so that was interesting. But essentially, we are here very similar to Greenlit, where we're here to kind of nurture and support a filmmaker on their journey. And for us, that part of the journey is getting their film into film festivals that can benefit their career progression, their networking opportunities, but also just to get their film in front of an audience. And we have the wonderful opportunity to meet so many different filmmakers at different levels and at different styles and different parts of the world. So we have a very international slate. We are very fussy for good reason. We don't take everything on. We are very honest in our appraisal of a film. When we're watching a film, it's generally to see if we think it's strong enough to go onto a festival circuit, but also perhaps raise any other potential obstacles that might kind of hinder the film. That could be bad sound, or we have it recently, subtitles that are not clear enough, running time, potential kind of execution of story, and so on. So we're very honest, we're very approachable. That's how we have good relationships with festivals, because we only send them content that we know that they would appreciate and actually desire to screen. So tonight I'm going to do an overview of how best to approach the festival circuit. I do want to stress one thing, which is, and I'm going to be very, very brutal about some things to do with strategy and budget and so on. There is no shortcut. You can't force a festival to play your film. You will hear no a lot. The best thing to do is to harness the good stuff, the actual kind of accolades and the successes that you have, and focus on that rather than let them outweigh it. So tonight I've got 2 case studies, kind of a compare and contrast. They have very different budgets and they are very different films, but I wanted to show you how their journey looked, but also what they still benefited from. So without further ado, because I've got quite a lot to go through, so I'm going to share my screen. We're going to talk about festival strategy does not have to be a headache. So we're going to kick off by talking about the different types of festivals, what they mean, and why it matters for you and your particular project. So the way that we split the festival circuit, very, very basically, there's a little bit more nuance to it, but I'll kind of go through that later down the line. But we split it into 3 sections. So we have top tier, we have audience led, and then we have the niche, format and genre. Now they actually can kind of migrate around each other, but just talking from a very kind of basic standpoint, these are the 3 chunks. So when we talk about top tier, we are talking about the very top prestigious festivals. So we're talking about Venice, Berlinale, Locarno, Cannes, you know, festivals that are extremely exclusive. They don't play an awful lot of short films. Locarno, Venice, roughly about 10 or 12 films for shorts, if that. They have a very particular taste. It generally tends to be very artistically led, highbrow, and they are very premiere led. So these festivals require a premiere of sorts, generally towards the top part of the premiere pyramid. So, you know, world premiere, international, European premiere, and so on. Now, they generally do come with a cost, minus Cannes. Cannes is free, but your film does have to be under 15 minutes, and a lot of people don't realize that. So they all have their own stipulations, but they're very, very shiny festivals, almost to the point that if you look into the audience are not going to be your average audience. They're not going to be the punter on the street. They're going to be other industry professionals, whether that be sales, distribution, production houses, other filmmakers, and a whole load of press. So these are very, very particular festivals. They generally are festivals that filmmakers gravitate to because they are amazing festivals if you get selected. But a lot of filmmakers don't necessarily look at the content that is selected by the festival. So what we're here to do is to try and reassess how filmmakers look at the festivals with their film in mind, which is why we're kind of doing this breakdown. So the next chunk is the actual most fruitful chunk on the circuit. It's what we call the audience-led festivals. So these are festivals which generally have proved their worth because they've stuck around for generally 4 or 5 years plus. They can sometimes still have industry affiliation, whether that be BAFTA, BIFA, or Canadian Film Award, or Academy, or European Film Award too. So you kind of, they're not second rate. They're still fantastic festivals. They're just less premiere led. So they don't require a world premiere for you to screen at London Short Film Festival or Aesthetica. They're just after really strong content. They are still industry known, as I said, but they have larger programs, especially when it comes to shorts, even more so if they're a short specific festival. So Aesthetica can sometimes screen up to 300 films, and some other festivals can probably play about 150 and so on. So you have more programming slots available, which just puts you in a better position just from the word go in terms of having more opportunity or an increased potential. They're also not as expensive as people think. So I mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for 18 years, and I can tell you now, when I first started doing this, the festivals were very expensive. They were $50 a pop. There were more premieres dotted around, even in the UK festivals. But what's happened is we have way too many film festivals now, I will say, but more festivals, and we have more filmmakers, which means more submissions going through. So there isn't necessarily a correlation as to festivals being more expensive. You could get selections. Now it's just a question of there's just so many submissions out there. So just to kind of pick through these, so you've got Aesthetica, which I'm sure most of you will have heard of, London Short Film Festival. The third picture is Clermont-Ferrand in France, and the last one is Tribeca too. So just a slight caveat to this is what I find really interesting is everyone's idea of a top level festival will vary. So often we get asked, well, I think Tribeca is a top tier festival. It's a very good, strong festival and it's industry known, but it's not actually as prolific as those very top ones. But it's down to the individual, because somebody might say that about Edinburgh International or BFI London and so on. But the best thing to do is just understand where it fits in terms of exclusivity. So then we have the niche format and genre festivals. So these generally tend to have a really focused audience or a community that they're working with or for. But they can also be really hyper specific, and that can be down to either the stories being told, how it was shot, or even the runtime. This plays to the strengths of the film, because essentially what you're doing is taking your film out of competition of the very oversubscribed festivals, acknowledging what makes it unique and playing to the strength and putting it in competition where it is best suited and stands a better chance. The benefit of all of these types of festivals, if they have a very particular focus, is that the community around them is exceptionally strong. So for example, I'll just go through the images. So the first one is Hlava Documentary Festival in Czech Republic. Now, let's say you got selected to screen there. Other festivals who want to screen documentaries, and they might be festivals with a documentary strand or actually a documentary focused festival, will attend Hlava, and they may see your documentary and they may get in touch to say, we saw it at Hlava and we'd love to consider it for our festival. Or if a programmer saw your film at the festival, it might be they get in touch with the program and say, could I have the contact details for the filmmaker? Same thing happens for horror festivals, sci-fi festivals, LGBTQ focused programs, also comedy. People are always looking for strong comedy. So they all attend each other's festivals when they've got a particular focus, because for a festival, they've given their stamp of approval to your film. So of course it goes in their favor to then get in touch. Doesn't guarantee an absolute selection, but it means that somebody is invested enough to reach out and consider your film. So the next picture is Black Star, where the focus is it has to be a Black director behind the camera telling their story. So again, very, very hyper specific, but it's because they have that clear remit and that's what the festival is supporting. Same as BFI Future Film Fest, you've got to be between ages 16 to 25. If you have a film that fits that criteria, you'd be foolish to ignore it. The last picture is Annecy, which is one of the largest animation festivals in France. Again, animation festivals do kind of chatter to each other, but again, they also kind of attend each other's festivals too. So this is just kind of very brief swathes of kind of shorthand in terms of like how to look at these festivals. But also, for example, if you take something like horror, within the own kind of horror community, you are going to have festivals which are top tier and then audience led and then really kind of niche and specific too. So why is it important to know about these different festivals, and why do I spend so much time talking about them to everyone I can? It's because it will help you as the creative understand where your audience is. And I think this is one of the biggest gaps in filmmakers' knowledge when they do step onto a festival circuit. And I get it. I've been hearing the same story for 18 years. You get overwhelmed by the festivals. All you want to do is get that prestige, get those laurels to prove that you can do it. And along the way, you do have those flights of fancy. What if I do submit to that big festival? What if I get in? The problem is that everyone's doing that. And what happens is that you spunk a load of money very quickly and get a lot of rejection and then feel really disheartened. And what we're here to try and do is actually kind of coach you to say, look, those festivals are amazing, but they're not necessarily after your film. But let's find some festivals which will really appreciate your film that can still give you that kudos without it ruining your mental health, without you kind of getting scared about rejection rates and without being out of pocket as well. Now, I can tell you that festivals will massively appreciate it if you have understood the level of your film and the quality of your product, and also just understanding why you submitted there. There are a lot of festivals out there that end up having to shut their doors early because filmmakers, and obviously it won't be anyone here because you're all good, but filmmakers sometimes just set all the parameters to free and they just blitz and submit everywhere. What often happens is there's a lot of festivals that have a remit for children's content. And what it means is that a lot of people can't actually, the film is really unsuitable for the festival that it's been submitted to, which has a knock-on effect that sometimes the actual festival has to close their doors early just because they've been overwhelmed by really unsuitable content. Now, as I say, obviously you're not going to do that because you're all brilliant and well-researched filmmakers. I'm just here to nudge you in the right direction. But going back to money, it can save you money where you can spend it elsewhere on better suited festivals. And I think that is the biggest thing that I'm going to bang my drum about, is just budget and making sure you know how you're spending it and where, because you can spend a lot of money, but also you don't have to. Like, there is a reason and a rhyme for everything. Apologies if you can hear the plane. I'm right next to an airport. So the next chapter I'm going to talk about is how to start looking for the film festivals. So where can you kind of apply your film and find these kind of, more hyper specific festivals. But first of all, I mentioned I'm going to talk about budget again. Cannot stress this enough. Everyone should be including a line in their production budget for submission fees to festivals and for deliverables, DCP, any marketing materials or travel you want to do with the film. Now, there is no magic number. I can talk to you about budgets that we work with as a strategy company, but remember that that's our game. Like, that is exactly our remit. So we're always going to be looking for a very healthy amount, but you can still manage quite a lot on a smaller amount. So for us, on average, for a live action short, we are recommending £700 worth to cover a year's worth of festival deadlines. That can be up to about 50 festivals. So again, it's not as expensive as people presume. But putting that aside, I want you to kind of focus on the budget you have and trying as much as you can to not reach into your own pocket, because that's where resentment grows, and you don't want that. You want to be proud of your film and your submissions. So even if you only have 300 quid for submissions or $500, just knowing that will help you and inform better decisions. Because if you know what you're spending, it will stop you from submitting it everywhere very, very quickly. It's the difference between knowing I've only got 300 quid and this submission is going to cost me £90. It's going to stop you because you want to be trying to submit to as many festivals as you can to increase potential of selection. More festivals, more opportunities. So now I'm going to talk about assets. So we kind of, the way that our strategy brains work when we're kind of looking at a film is we have this backbone, this kind of, like, as you can see, the purple writing, live action, documentary, short, feature, animation. So they are kind of the very basic, how do we assign this film when we're looking to a festival circuit. But then on the periphery, and this is only a very small cross section, there are festivals or categories which want all these different criterias, and it can be as very specific as human rights narratives, or they're looking for stories about relationships, or they have a Latino X focus, or they are wanting dystopian dramas. So again, like, we begin to really, really kind of drill down in a film and talk about stories in front of the camera, stories behind, and it can really help you hone in onto those particular festivals and categories that really can help you. So I've just done a very brief basic film data, which can be eligibility criteria for festivals. So just kind of going through them quickly: nationality, director, and production country. These are two of the most fruitful areas, especially if you are from perhaps a country that is not in the UK, because there will be festivals that have a focus on a particular country, or festivals that you can only submit to if you are from that country or you have a nationality of the director to fulfill the criteria. Tell you now that there are lots of festivals in Australia that you can only submit to if it's an Australian production or if you have an Australian director. Same goes for France, same goes for Greece, same goes for Canada, all over the place. So if you have a multicultural aspect to your work, it's definitely something to see as a bonus, because you can again really hone in and help the film travel a bit more. Budget is also something that can be a qualifying factor. I think most people get concerned that their budget for their film isn't very big. No one cares, it's the story you're telling. Some of the best films we've looked after have been 50 quid to make or 500 pounds to make, but they've just been a really good stellar story to share. But you will have festivals that perhaps focus on low budget features made under 250k, or you might have a low budget category, which is anything made under £3,000, and a high budget, anything over £3,000. Again, qualifying factor. Date of birth too, it's not because they're being nosy, it's because there are festivals out there that have very specific requirements. So I mentioned earlier BFI Future Fest, which is 16 to 25, but you have New Fest in Portugal, and they have a criteria, which is if you have, if your director is under the age of 35 and hasn't made a feature, there's a particular category for you. You've got Women Over 50 Film Festival, where it's the focus is on either the narrative story that we're seeing, or the director behind the camera is a female over 50. We've had clients that have been 14. We've also had clients that have been 78. So everything kind of can fit into a criteria, and sometimes it's not as specific, but again, if there is a reason to utilize it, absolutely go for it. Production date is quite important, especially as we're now kind of coming out of the main brunt of the pandemic. Festivals did put a bit of a hold on rolling on their production year eligibility. So if you go and look at a festival listing, they will generally say we want films made after the 1st of January 2021. Generally that rolls on every year, but during the pandemic, festivals held off because they knew that people were not able to kind of finish their projects, or perhaps withdrew for the first chunk of that year. But I would say most festivals now still want 2021 onwards, and as we kind of go towards the end of the year, you'll see that those festivals beginning to open up. Might kind of put halfway through the year, but generally it's kind of going to roll into 2022. And duration, that's probably the most simple one. There are festivals that want films under 15 minutes, under 19 minutes, under 20, under 22, under 25, 30, 40, and so on. Every festival is very different. And it's why running time is important, because if you have a film where maybe it's a flabby edit or your credits are quite slow and it takes it over that kind of milestone runtime, the thing to remember is when a festival is asking for your runtime, they mean the entire film. They don't just mean the story and the credits are separate, they mean everything together. So if your film is 15 minutes and 48 seconds, it's 15 minutes and 48 seconds. So of course, if they have a 15-minute cutoff, they're going to be quite strict. So it's always something to bear in mind. So I wanted to do 2 examples and then 2 case studies. So putting all of this into practice, or actually not putting it into practice, but using them as examples to really highlight why it can be helpful to kind of approach your own project like this. So finding the strengths of your project. So I've just made up a film. It's a live action sci-fi, 22 minutes, French production, and it deals with mental health. So what I wanted to do is kind of go through each of those assets and kind of really kind of focus in on why it would be really beneficial to isolate it, expand on it, and then also do your research there. So the majority of festivals program live action, and there will be festivals that have a sci-fi category, but there'll also be festivals that are purely sci-fi based. That's all they want. The thing about a genre like sci-fi, horror, thriller, suspense, fantasy is they come under the genre umbrella. And some festivals will expand on that. They'll unpack it and say, look, we're called a fantasy festival, but if you have something sci-fi, we're happy to have a look. So again, it's something to be aware of, because you don't want to just blitz it. It's good to do the research and double check you're spending money in the best places. But not all festivals want sci-fi. Most notably, those very top tier festivals that I mentioned, the kind of Venice, Locarno, Berlinale, and Cannes, very rare for them to play kind of a traditional genre piece. So you would be looking at more audience-led. But what I would say is it's not limited to just sci-fi festivals. If you have a live action sci-fi, you can go anywhere, but obviously the strongest part of your community that you're trying to find would be down the genre route. Now, 22 minutes, I mentioned earlier that every festival has their own cutoff runtime. It will limit the film where it can go, and it might be that there will be some festivals that you really want to submit to that you haven't realized have a particular cutoff time. But there are festivals that generally are looking for anything under 30 minutes and 40 minutes. And some of them are beginning to have a longer short category for those kind of mid-length that fall in between. It can be a deciding factor for a programmer to weigh up when they are curating. They generally get 90 minutes to play with. And for them, it's to try and find the films that fit together, sit together, sing from the same kind of narrative theme, perhaps, but also to play as many films as they can. So if they've got a 22-minute film and maybe they have a 5-minute film and a 10-minute film, it might be the deciding factor of playing one or those other two. It's going to be the strongest, best suited films that get selected, but it is something to bear in mind. It has to be strong to eat up a longer running time. And by that, what I mean is that the film has to be that length to tell the story. Sometimes we watch a 25-minute film and really it's a 17-minute film. It's just they're dragging their feet on establishing shots or really long credits or scenes that don't really add anything. So this example film is a French production. Let's say it has subtitles. It means it can travel a lot further because, of course, a lot of people are asking for captions or subtitles now for a hard of hearing audience. French festivals have requirements of nationality or country of production, which means that there will be a lot of festivals in France that this could be submitted to. Also, we're seeing in the last kind of 5 years, a lot of festivals in the US and Canada are actually wanting international content. So it doesn't actually exclude it just because it's a French production with subs. Is actually something a little bit more tastier for a festival overseas because they're looking to play stories that are not from their own country that they're screening in. There are festivals that kind of deal with mental health narratives, but anything that you have in your story, whether that be a social story or narrative, mental health or human rights, or even kind of gun crime, anything like that, you will find that festivals will have an eye open for stories that are dealing with this, either because that's their remit or they have a particular curative strand that they're looking to lean into. The one thing to bear in mind is that there are a lot of films being made and sometimes they are about the same thing. So I'm not saying that absolutely every film will be similar, but there may be a similar tone or a similar narrative arc to it. And again, that plays a part when somebody is considering which film should we go with. So with this film, this hypothetical film, we'd be aiming for festivals on the genre circuit that are highly revered, looking to industry known festivals that have a genre category, so you can still straddle, and managing expectations to not waste monies or hopes on those very big prolific festivals that don't generally play those types of films. So in complete contrast, I've put together another kind of hypothetical, which is a live action drama, 12 minutes. It's a UK production and it covers social issues. So again, majority of festivals do play live action shorts. Festivals generally always have a generic drama category, but it is the most popular piece of content made out on the circuit. A live action drama is the most kind of oversubscribed category. At 12 minutes, majority of festivals would accept this because the lowest runtime generally is 15 minutes and under. You will get some festivals that have a 10-minute cutoff. They generally tend to be student focused, or they're more kind of competitions that you have to create to the brief that they have. Shorter means more slots available on the circuit. You know, the shorter your film runs, that a programmer can take a punt. They can perhaps take a bit of a gamble because it's not going to eat up too much time of their 90 minutes they're playing with. But programmers just appreciate shorter content. They really do, because it means they can play more. And I think any programmer will tell you that they have nightmares about having to say no to so many films that they love. So this hypothetical is a UK production. Festivals that are open may have a regional aspect or a national category focus. So for example, Bolton International have a made up North category. So if you kind of fit into the criteria there, again, takes you out of that main competition, and really increases the potential of, you know, eyes on the film with that strand in mind. But then you have something like, you know, Canadian festivals will often have like a Canadian production category, which is either free or cheap. So again, can really play into the kind of strengths of your film, but help the budget too. Any film that's from the UK submitting outside of the UK will generally be considered international. You might find that some festivals will have an international category, or they might just have generic drama, comedy, thriller, and so on. The UK circuit is very small, so always look further afield. The majority of everyone's strategy is predominantly in the States, just because there are a lot more festivals there, a lot more kind of hierarchy in terms of tastemaker festivals, genre festivals, and regional festivals that perhaps hold a little bit more sway or affiliation. But if you have something that deals with a social narrative, it is harder for a film to really get proper traction and light the circuit up perfectly, only because, as I said, a lot of festivals receive drama, and they're often getting stories about the same thing. So they're having to pick one that really fits the audience engagement that they're looking for, the quality that they're after, but also runtime and tone and everything else. But there is a lot of hard going drama made, and that's kind of, I don't think that's ever going to go away. It's been in existence for as long as I can remember. It's just understanding that sometimes having a 20-minute hard going drama and being pipped to the post by perhaps like a 5-minute goofy comedy, you know, they're two very different films, but they're also kind of trying to play to the same audience. So sometimes a programmer has to make those difficult decisions, and you're not always going to be happy with them. So again, looking to the circuit with this film, this hypothetical film, we'd be looking at known festivals on home turf, but also festivals that perhaps have industry kudos overseas. And again, managing expectations, but perhaps aiming for some festivals that perhaps are a little bit of an aspirational reach for the film, but the budget might be there, and it's a good kind of strong drama to try. So how you submit to a festival and where to find them has changed a lot over the years. Predominantly Film Freeway is the monopoly at the minute. You will find that festivals will often be listed on more than one submission platform, and that is because as a festival they're trying to spread the net wide on trying to find you know, films coming from different parts of the world. Short Film Depot is the only place you can submit to Clermont-Ferrand because they created the website. Fest Home has a lot of Melia d'Argent, which is like the horror version of the BAFTAs, apparently, you know, version. Goya's too, very good if you have a horror film. It's kind of a Spanish platform, so it has quite a lot of regional festivals there. Some festivals you have to submit on the website, so there is no kind of submission platform. You have to go onto their own website, then use their own portal. So for example, BFI London, Venice, Cannes, Berlinale, Locarno, they are British Shorts in Germany as well. They are all websites that you have to submit through. Some places just want an email. It's very old school. It's very few and far between. Generally tends to be either experimental or very small animation festivals, but literally some of them just want an email with a link to the film, and that's it. Now, I just wanted to talk very briefly because I realize I've got so much to get through, and I'm really sorry. I hope I get everything in. So I cannot recommend enough creating some kind of document to keep track of where you submitted, any premieres that are needed for that film, and also when they take place. And that doesn't have to, we use Airtable. Like, Airtable's brilliant, it's free, it's amazing. You don't have to use something like that, just a Google Doc sheet or an Excel spreadsheet, but just something that is up to date and something that has all the information to hand, because I cannot tell you how many times that people submit to festivals and not realizing that they're not eligible anymore. You're not going to get the money back because you spent the money. So just being aware of that would be really, really good for you. So putting it into practice, I did 2 hypotheticals, and now I'm actually going to show you 2 real films, not show you the film, but show you the kind of metadata behind them. So we have a short film called The Tide. This is a 17-minute live action fiction film. So the assets on the camera, it's a drama, it's a regional narrative, somewhere up north. It deals with mental health, also deals with age, kind of on the older scale of thing. And it's also set in a fishing town. So the stories behind the camera, we didn't have too many. It was a British production and it was a debut film for the director. So what we did is we kind of took all of that information and kind of assessed the quality of the film. And they had quite a large budget. They had an exceptionally healthy budget of £1,000. Again, you do not need £1,000, but this is just what they had to play with. So with that £1,000 and with all the assets that we've just spoken about, we found initially 61 festivals that we thought this would be strong enough to go to. So this film came to us completely fresh, no previous submissions. It was something we thought best suited for the audience-led, just because of the nature of the regional narrative. It was, it had a slight fantasy nuance to it, but it was more about kind of a gritty drama in the north about, you know, passing on this heritage of working on the boats. So we went for the audience-led because that's where we thought that this film would fit. We also looked at coastal towns overseas. We looked at places in America that we thought they would understand. Whilst this is a regional story, they will understand the plight and the kind of story beats because of being a coastal town. They're going to be somewhere that knows this job and this labor. We looked at mental health festivals too, because this looked at mental health in older men, and also the British focus too. There are festivals that wanted British content or British productions. Now, I wanted to do this breakdown because on first glance, it looks absolutely appalling. And this is where we're trying to get people to reassess the successes. So this actually got submitted to 76 festivals overall. We had an additional 15, which were a mix of requests, which is where somebody had reached out to view the film, or just extra submissions that the creative team wanted to do. This film had 14 selections. So if you put that all together, 18% hit rate with an 82% rejection rate. Now that sounds absolutely appalling, but it's not, because if you look at those 14 selections, there are a mixture of absolutely fantastic festivals that qualified the film for both BAFTA and BIFA submission. So again, it's less about quantity and more about quality. And I cannot urge people to really, really think about that more. It matters where you submit. It matters where your selections come from, because if you're doing it to progress your career, you want someone to look at your selections and go, that's a really good festival. That's really hard to get into. That's really specific. They really know where their audience is. So again, when we said, right, we're going to look at audience-led that still have industry affiliation, we ended up with 2 Academy affiliated festival selections, 2 BAFTA affiliated festivals, 2 BIFA affiliated, and 4 Movie Maker magazine recognized festivals, all of which had their own strengths and their own opportunities. And again, we looked at the, what I said about the coastal towns. That was Port Townsend, Myrtle Beach, and Anchorage, and they absolutely lapped it up because they were like, this speaks to our community, it speaks to our audience, even though it's a story from the other side of the world. So in complete contrast to that, I picked 1-800-D Direct. It's 11-minute live action comedy, so genre this time. So the assets on camera is female focused. It's a very tongue-in-cheek comedy. It is kind of double entendre. And it pastiches a period piece, so it is kind of set in the past. Assets behind the camera, female director, is a British production. The producers, who are also the 2 leads in the film, are Australian and American, so it meant that we could play to the strengths of research in terms of if they wanted to be able to get a crowd to go and attend a screening in their home turf. They had a very different budget. They had £550, but we still found 51 festivals for it. Now, the filmmaker had already tried their luck with higher tiered festivals, but no such luck. That's because it's not that kind of film to go to higher tier. This is a comedy film, fantastic comedy. So again, there aren't too many comedy specific festivals, but there are lots of festivals with a comedy category. So again, I mentioned earlier, festivals are looking for comedy. Female focus, so again, looking at categories and festivals with that as a focus. Also British, so it's a British production, but it's set in Manhattan. So again, that's something that we played into when we did the research. Now, again, I want to do the breakdown of the circuit journey as percentages because it looks awful, but again, it's not, it's absolutely cracking. They had 62 festivals overall, with the additional 11 being a mixture of requests and extra submissions. They had 20 selections for this film. So that translates as 32% hit rate and 68% dud rate. But again, qualified for both BAFTA and BIFA submission. They had an Academy affiliated selection. They had 2 BAFTA affiliated festival selections, 3 BIFA affiliated festivals, and 3 Movie Maker magazines. So again, goes to show you, it's about where you submit and where you get those selections. They can still translate, they can still talk on your behalf of the film. Now we played into some strengths. So again, I mentioned it's a comedy and it is also set in Manhattan. Yofi Fest set in New York and has a comedy category. This was absolutely perfect for them. Played at Shortcom as well. But then again, we looked at festivals that were after just something really, really unique and something different, like Tallgrass and Sydney Underground. So again, this film played in quite an array of different territories because it was good and because it was strong and because it was funny. So chapter 4, I'm going to talk about things to remember, because all of this is leading into you just understanding your film and what makes it your film or what makes it unique. So I'm going to go through some myths in the last chunk of time I have. So these are myths that we get asked a lot of questions about, and it is my life's vocation to kind of try and dispel as many of these as I can. So the first one is you have to know someone to get your film screened, and it is the #1 myth that I hear all the time. Now I will caveat all of these by saying there are festivals that do this, but they are not festivals that are worth it or decent and legit and ones that you should be dealing with. How to kind of carve yourself out from those bad eggs is to do the research, talk to filmmakers, ask me anything. It is a common myth, but honestly, if your film it's your film. It's not anything to do with who you know. Films are not watched by the festivals is another kind of cry from filmmakers. This kind of harks back to people sitting on their Vimeo analytics. Now, even Vimeo themselves have kind of come out and said that their analytics are not absolutely correct, especially if they are embedded into a third party like Film Freeway. A lot of festivals, ourselves included, will download a film to watch offline because of buffering issues, or because we're about to go on a 10-hour flight, or because we're watching them and we don't want to be disturbed with any kind of internet outages. What I will say, again, caveat, if a festival has been sent a 20-minute film and after 6 minutes they know it's just not for their festival, they're not obliged to watch the rest of the film because they already know that they're going to say no to the film. The other slight caveat on that caveat is if a festival does offer feedback, it's not a common thing, but if they do offer feedback, they will often watch it to the end. But these notes are very, very simple. They are very kind of shorthand because they are screener notes. They're not necessarily in-depth critique. An EPK, an electronic press kit help selection, it neither helps nor hinders. It's not the deciding factor for your film. It's the same as a trailer or a poster. These are not things that make your film get selected. It's your film. Same with cover letters. Cover letters are a hangover from 10 years ago when we were sending out physical screeners. We had to send, show you how old I am now, I had to send VHSs and DVDs, and the cover letter was to basically say to the festival, this is my name, this is the name of the film, and this is the return address. And they've kind of stuck around. I can tell you now that I probably know about 5 programmers at most who will read a cover letter, but it's only after they've watched a film and if they're interested in it. You should be saying what you want to say in your film. If you're relying on a cover letter to swing it, it's not the best way to do about it. They don't guarantee selection, but also, you know, they often don't get read. Which kind of leads into the next thing, which again is something that's lingering from 10 years ago. If you contact the festival after you submit, it helps. Funny enough, it doesn't. A lot of these festivals are run by a small team, or they're sometimes actually people who have another day job. It's sometimes a group of many or a handful of people. Ringing them up to see if they've liked the film and watched the film, it really doesn't do you any favors. And I will say, and I can absolutely vouch for this, festivals talk to each other. So if you are a festival that's gone a bit of a bad rap because you've been pestering, or perhaps you've kind of responded very badly to a rejection or anything like that, festivals talk to each other. And that's just to give you a heads up, because everyone should be nice in this part of the industry. It's not always the case, but I think, you know, having integrity to understand when somebody says no is always best. But also, I want to talk exceptionally briefly about scam festivals. There's no regulatory body for film festivals, and it means that anyone can start a festival, charge a few bucks, and have an open call and not take place. They do exist. They're purely to make money from you, and the only thing I can tell you is that they're never going to go away. It's like whack-a-mole. You get rid of one and another one comes up. But do your due diligence. Check their online footprint. Check if they're using images from their own festival, because some of them don't. If something doesn't feel right, just walk away. Ask around. I would say don't necessarily rely on the reviews that are on Film Freeway, because not all of them show a clear picture. Also, the festival can delete emails, delete reviews and so on. But they do exist, unfortunately, and it's something that pisses me off, but it's something that I want every filmmaker to be aware of, so they're prepped to be able to look at something and understand, does this look legit? Is this real? Do I need to submit here, or do I need to ignore this? It's the same as phishing emails. We get a lot of requests for films, but it's generally hidden as a blanket email. So bearing in mind that we're handling and or advising about 270 films currently. So when we get an email saying, hey, we saw your film at this festival, we'd love to consider it for our festival, here's a 20% discount code. When we get that for about 100 of our films, you know, it's easy for us to go, yeah, phishing email, because we can see the veracity of them. But obviously, as an individual filmmaker, when you get that to your inbox, and it might be an Instagram DM, a message on Vimeo, on Facebook, on Twitter, anything, they really come to you in any way now. It can be hard to decipher what is a real request and what is just a phishing email. Easiest thing, if somebody is genuinely interested in your film, generally rule of thumb is 100% discount, full fee waiver. Now, it's not the case for everyone, because there are some small festivals that can't afford to swallow the costs of offering you that, but it'll be a heavy discount. It'll be like a 70 or 80% discount on an already small fee. Some of these emails come and it's like, hey, here's 50% discount, but it's on their last deadline, which is 80 bucks. So it's still going to cost you 40 bucks, which is quite a lot of money. So just be cautious. Knowing the name of your film is designed to lure you in. Knowing your individual name is again kind of something to make you feel like you've been reached out independently. Just ask questions. If in doubt, ask some questions. We have film festivals all the time emailing us, and every time we're emailing them back saying, what was the festival you saw it at? Why do you think it suits your festival? You know, and sometimes it's because they've literally just sent a blanket email and they're asking for horror content, but they've sent it to one of our romantic comedies. So again, it's quite easy for us, but I want to be able to prep you to do the same thing. Not all festivals are bad. Not all of these festivals that reach out with these kind of requests are bad, but just have a conversation with them. If they are decent and if they are legit and if they are genuinely interested in your film, they will answer any of your questions. But the best thing to do is, if something doesn't feel right, don't do it, because it's a waste of money. I want you to be spending money at festivals that you'll be happy when you get that selection email, not that you suddenly go, oh, actually, I don't really want to screen there anymore, because that's an easy way of spending money where you don't need to. So I mentioned about being polite. Please do be polite as much as you can. Some of these festivals are run, as I said, by people with day jobs and families. Some of them are husband and wife teams. Some of them are big festivals where they've got so many departments. But it's two ways as well. Festivals should be polite to you as well, because you are providing them with the backbone of their festival. They can't exist without you. But just bears repeating, just be nice as much as you can. I've mentioned rejection a few times. It's not a pleasant part of the job, but it is inevitable. You know, there are only so many programming slots. There are only so many festivals in the world, which is growing. But I want everyone to really kind of understand, sometimes when a festival says no, it's not because they didn't like the film. Sometimes it's because they had 10 other films that had the same story and they had to pick one for their audience, or it just picked it to the post in scoring, or in the judge's final decision, that it just narrowly missed out. Sometimes programmers lose sleep because they want to be able to play more films, but it's just a really, really tough circuit. You never know when your next selection is going to come around the bend, and sometimes it will be like the bigger and better, stronger selection that really kind of makes it for your film, which is why we try and kind of get people to reassess where they're aiming for with their film, because you're never going to fully get rid of rejection, but what you can do is actually focus on the strengths of the film to try and reduce it somewhat, so you're not constantly paying out and getting those not very nice emails. We try and help our clients as much as we can, where they have to opt in to hear the rejections, and that's because it can be hard getting those emails, and we know, because we're the ones that are having to pass on that information. But try not to get it under your skin too much, because you've made a film. That's the important part. You've made a film, you've made a story to share. And now it's about trying to find your audience, and your audience might be harder to find than others, but you will find your audience at some point. And that's because the circuit is big and sprawling, and it's about trying to find those festivals that really do champion your stories. So I've rabbited on an awful lot, and I hope I haven't gone too quickly, because I realize there's a lot of stuff to cover. But does anyone have any questions?
That was fantastic, Katie. Really, really great session. I've been attending festivals. I have run them. I actually have a stack of submissions to watch when I get in tonight, because I'm on the jury for this year's British Urban Film Festival. And I learned loads, and that was very, very fascinating. So there's a bunch of questions coming up from the audience, which I'm going to kind of moderate.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, so what you say is entirely correct. And at Greenlit, we always recommend people bringing productions to us. We say, you definitely want to think about the afterlife of this film. And that ain't free necessarily, so you want to think about what you're going to do and how you're going to present that. And of course, the festival strategy and festival submissions is a big part of it that people don't necessarily think about. So I'll get the swift plug in here. If anybody is interested, if anybody has a completed film or a nearly completed film, and they want to think about that next step, and we've done that many, many times, is helped nearly completed or completed films raise their budgets for their own screenings and their festival strategy and those kind of things to get in front of their audience. And Katie was thoroughly correct. And this is something we press upon people as well, is to think about your audience, whether that's your general audience, or specifically in this case, which festivals are really going to be appropriate for you. Not most, that's unfair. A lot of filmmakers kind of jump into it and think, well, my film's for everybody. And there is no film ever made that is for everybody. It will have its strengths, it will have its attributes, it will have its niche, and that's its market. And so a little bit of thought about that, in our experience, certainly goes a long way, as it does on the festival circuit. So I did see, I've got some questions in the chat. So first of all, we've got, can we change the duration of our films to make them eligible to apply for festivals which are based on duration? For example, I have a 12-minute short and I want to submit it for a festival taking under 10 minutes. Is that done? Can you recut to fit the brief?
You can. I wouldn't advise to, though. That's the thing, because if you're telling me that your film could be 10 minutes, why is it not 10 minutes to begin with? That's what I always say, because we get it a lot where people say, I want to make a Sundance cut, I want to make a 15-minute cut for Cannes, and I go, well, why is it not 15 minutes to begin with? You have to really go onto the circuit with the story you want to tell and stand by it. If you keep flitting around, what that shows me is that you haven't quite decided what the story is. So I would say, if you've got a 12-minute film and it can be cut down to 10, and it doesn't sacrifice story, it doesn't squash your credits so they're unreadable, and go with the 10-minute version. It will help. It will help with submissions because it will be shorter. But just stick with one. That's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, that sounds entirely correct. The festivals to serve the film rather than necessarily the other way around, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is from G or Guy. Apologies if I got the pronunciation wrong. Hi, Katie. We connected over Clubhouse a while back. Clubhouse, whatever happened to that?
Crikey.
Thanks for giving us your time. Can you tell me a bit more about how you help filmmakers who have a minimal budget and how to assist them on the festival circuit? I read a bit on your website, but it would be great to hear more. Cheers.
Thank you. Lovely to reconnect again. So I would say everyone's budget is going to be really wildly different. So for some of our clients, our prices are expensive and a luxury, and for others, it's already accrued in the budget. So therefore, it's easy to pay for. I think what I would suggest is that any filmmaker who submits their work to us, we watch everything for free. And we give detailed feedback for free too. And sometimes when we can see that perhaps there is potential in a film, but we know the budget's not there, what we can do is offer, 3 or 4 festivals that we would recommend submitting to. So we can kind of nudge you in the right direction without having to, get you to pay for a whole service and so on. We're not a pushy company. We know that everyone's budget is very different. So all we can do is watch content, say where we think it's strong enough to go to, and say, if you want to join us, great. If not, please keep us in the loop of what you work on next. I think sometimes people presume that you have to spend so much money. Like I say, just reiterating, because we are a strategy company, we are always needing to have a healthy budget from someone, because that's how we can maximize the potential of our work. But if you're doing it by yourself, even half a budget, even having like 300 quid, you can be selective. It's just understanding all the research that I've mentioned, like, where you can spend it, where you can maximize it. So I would say, if you have a film, send it to us, preferably a 2021 production onwards, then we're happy to watch it and give feedback, because that's the least we can do.
Fantastic. And I reiterate my own high opinion of Katie and the team there. It's their business, and we've only got so many hours in the day, but I do know they all love helping filmmakers. It's why we're here, same as us. I know that for a fact. So Maya says, excellent talk. Couldn't agree more. Thank you, Maya. And Kevin says, is it worth holding out for the bigger festivals, or just apply to festivals as deadlines are approaching on Film Freeway? So I guess that's, how do you schedule your...
Yeah, so here's the thing. Kevin, your bigger festival is probably going to be very different to my bigger festival. So this is what I was saying earlier, about understanding what you see as the big guns, and then what you see as the more kind of obtainable festivals. What I would say is every festival will slightly overlap, and by that what I mean is, for example, Manchester International Film Festival has a deadline the 23rd of May, but it doesn't happen till February next year. Meanwhile, Flickers Rhode Island has a deadline coming up this month and happens in August this year. So there's nothing to stop you from submitting to several festivals at the same time, but just being aware of when they take place and if they require a premiere stipulation. A lot of our job is done in the research stage. It's me and Ian talking to each other going, do you reckon we should hold off for this year, or do you think we should go for the more expensive deadline because we want it in this year's edition? And that's a tricky conversation at the minute with something like Holly Shorts. Their deadline, it isn't actually their final deadline, but the next deadline is $77, and that's a lot of money, but it's a fantastic festival. And it's also happening August. So again, it's about going, well, is this film, should I try this year because it's the last time it can try this year? Or is it's a bit of a punt, but if it gets selected there in August, it sets it up for the rest of the year? Or is it money is tight, I cannot afford to do it, let's do it next year and see if we can find some other festivals? So it's going to be down to what you think is a big festival. But what I would say, when you have a film that is not aiming for those big, shiny Venice, Locarno, Berlin, Cannes films, festivals, if you have a film like that, you can be so much more nimble. You can play at Damn Short Film Festival in Nevada, which is, it's a recognized festival, it's a good fun festival, but it's not prolific. But then you can still go on and play Tribeca a few months later. And then you can go on and play, South by the following year. So unless a festival has a very strict stipulation, and being aware of it, you can play at a variety of festivals. What I would say is don't go too small too early, because those festivals generally they're less fussy about premiere. If they have one, they're less fussy about the production year. And it means that they're kind of low-hanging fruit that you can do later down the line. They generally tend to be the really hyper-specific festivals. Like we've got a documentary feature that's about it's a music documentary feature about an Indigenous rock band going on tour in Australia. So Australian production, an Indigenous story. And some of those Indigenous festivals are fantastic for the film, but they're also really small. What we're trying to do is get career progression for the director and awareness for the community. So it means that some of those small festivals, and it might be music specific festivals that really play to their strength, we're putting them towards the end because we want them to play festivals that perhaps are not so small to begin with, but it can all filter in. And that's a feature, where premiere stipulation is a bit hotter. So it's not a guarantee that there's a right or wrong way. What I would say is don't aim too small to begin with, because the chances are your film might be able to aim a bit higher.
Excellent. Amit says thank you for your advice for his earlier question, and follows up with, are there any funds or grants to support filmmakers to submit to festivals? I guess an extension of that question might be to attend festivals as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would say there aren't any grants that I'm fully aware of. There are conversations we're having as a company with organizations because we feel that it's something that filmmakers need support in. But they generally tend to be included in a prize. I can't say too much because it's not announced yet, but I would say a lot, as you mentioned earlier, Pete, that people do crowdfund for submission fees. So I think, to be honest, if I'm being absolutely honest, again, I'm going to be blunt. If you want to raise funds for that, raise it yourself, because then you have full creative control on how you spend that money. Sometimes when you get a prize or you win a fund, you have to stipulate or detail how you spent it, and it has to be spent a certain way. So I would kind of say try and raise it yourself, or you could do private investment. Again, the more people's money that you take, the more that there is kind of a risk and reward. But if you can kind of define it as a community and, involve people from the beginning, then it's a lot easier to kind of ask for that support.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thumbs up again for crowdfunding. It definitely can. It can work if you're prepared to put the effort in and build your community.
Yeah.
As you mentioned the word community, that's exactly it. So G/G, thanks. That's great. Got 2 shorts and be in touch. Bravo.
Fantastic.
Best of luck. Hi, Katie. This is from Emma. And she says, hi, Katie, would you have any advice or tips on submitting student documentary festivals? So student documentary films onto festivals with unlicensed commercial music in it. Do festivals support clearing your music sometimes?
No, they don't. As an exchange of you paying a submission fee to put your film in for consideration, you are acknowledging that you have cleared and acquired all licensing or clearance that's needed. My advice to you is to not have the music in it. It can be detrimental to you as a filmmaker, but also for the festival if they screen it. It is a very heavy fine. That it would probably be easier to just, either reshoot that part or just have audio over it or something like that. It's tricky because the thing is, whenever we get sent a film, if we hear, we've got very good ears between the whole team because we've all got different tastes in music. So one of us will be like, that's Deftones, like that hasn't been cleared. But then one of us will be like, oh, that sounds like Trent Reznor, probably from the library of music he made free that people could use. So there is a difference, but it's one of those problems that you should nip in the bud at the beginning, because, for example, if you went on to sell that, then you would be asked for the paperwork for it, and you won't have it. So yeah,
I reiterate that completely. Clear it seriously, otherwise, not just for festivals, your film can't really have any kind of life without that clearance. Even if you put it on YouTube, it's likely to get pulled. So library music, as I say, there's plenty of great library music out there, including, I didn't know about Trent Reznor's library of music, but it doesn't surprise me. What a guy. Find some local musicians or some, scour YouTube, and there will be some musicians and have a word. And the final option, there's nothing to stop you reaching out and asking if you can have the music for nominal fee. And if the musicians involved, if they are, generous people and they like what you're doing, this happens. It's not it's not frequent, but it does happen. So get those ducks in a row. There's more than one. Get multi-animal metaphors here. Get the ducks in a row, because there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Don't get them mixed up. Can't get cats in a row.
Skin your ducks, and you definitely can't put cats in a row. No. Marvelous. Okay. Do we have any more questions? Thanks there from Emma. I had a question popped up, which is something that frequently I've heard of, and I'm a little surprised nobody's asked it. What about getting fee waivers? Any advice on filmmakers who would like to get a fee waiver? Because, of course, it stacks up.
Yeah.
Any advice?
Don't expect them. So for a film festival, the bigger festivals perhaps can afford to give some out. Some festivals can't. I think what filmmakers don't realize is if you are given a fee waiver code and it's used on Film Freeway, the festival, whilst they are giving you a free submission, they still have to pay a commission to the platform for that, which is why sometimes a festival might say, can you just email me a screener link, because it saves on cost for the festival. The one thing I can guarantee you, again, from knowing lots of festival programmers and festival directors, the one guarantee to piss someone off is to send them a begging email going, I'd love to submit to your festival, but I've spent all of my budget. Can I have a fee waiver, please? Because what that sounds like is that they are an afterthought. And some of them will like those beg stories. Some of them will be aggrieved by them. The easiest thing to do is to try and have the submission fee budget to hand. I think the best way to think about it is the submission fee that you're paying is paying someone to consider your film. So it's taking the time to watch your film, critique it, discuss it with the team, and then either put it forward or say it's not suitable for this festival. And a lot of these programmers are not getting paid the best, but they're doing it because it's part of a progression to, career path, that they will end up being a programmer someday. They're getting the hours in. So don't expect them. But what I would say is see if they have discounts already available. So a lot of festivals will detail discounts on their submission page or on their own website. Some of them will have fun with it. There's a brilliant festival in Texas called Deep in the Heart, that literally, if you read their rules and regulations, they're quite fun. I'm not going to spoil it, but there are some quite funny bits in there. But if you scroll to the bottom, literally clause like 30 or something, it says, if you've read this far, here's a discount code. You know, so it's there, and you can get, I think it's like 20% off. If you look at something like Bend Film, which is in Portland, Oregon, they've got $10 discount for female directors, 80%, no, 70% discount for Black female directors, $25 off for, I think it's Indian, or no, BIPOC male directors. So sometimes the discounts are there. If you look at Blackbird Film Festival in New York, they often have a discount on Film Freeway, but if you go onto their website, they also have a discount there, which is different. You know, so I think it's just taking the time. But again, it goes back to budget. If you've budgeted effectively, yes, a waiver helps, but you can't go onto a festival circuit expecting them from the word go, because you might email a festival and say, can I have a waiver code? They may be busy, they may not get back to you till the last deadline, and they're coming back and saying no, and you've missed the opportunity to submit to a cheaper deadline. And we still have that, like, you know, sometimes a filmmaker will say, oh, I'm an alumni of that festival, and we're like, well, they haven't got back to us, so do you want to run the risk of missing the cheaper deadline or wait till it's too late? But yeah, I think waivers are tough because we get them from festivals, but not everyone, and we also don't demand them, so that's down to relationship. We are also in a unique position because we have a very large slate, so a festival is going to say, can you send us 40 films, 40 of your strongest films, which is very different to a filmmaker sending one. So I think it's tough, but just to not expect them, because they're not always going to be guaranteed.
I think that's entirely correct. There's probably not a lot of harm in asking. I'd add, just in a personal experience, you know, if you've made your film, you should be networking and talking about it and promoting it across every channel, and back channel do exist. So, you know, I have no formal power to grant fee waivers, for example, for Buff, but if I see something that I think would fit the festival and it really excites me, and I see that in my personal capacity, you can be damn sure that, you know, Justin, Emmanuel and Claire and the rest of the team, they will be hearing about it, and they will hear my enthusiasm. And, you know, and equally, I'll be telling the directors of other festivals, you know, you should really be having a look at this. So, you know, that kind of back channeling, but you can't be shrinking violet when you're talking about your film, and word may find its way into the right ears.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that might wrap it up, and that has been a fantastic session. And let me tell you, good people, that's not the whole of the festival formula story, because in we yet to set the date, but we will also be bringing on Ian Bignell, Katie's partner there, and he will be talking about the practicalities of film festival, how to attend a film festival, how to get your film in the best position, how to make it visible, how to create a buzz and create excitement around that actual festival screening. And if you enjoyed today, that's going to be equally unmissable. Please follow our social channels. Obviously, I'll let you plug yours in a second, Katie, because I don't know what they are off the top of my head. Follow our social channels: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We are Greenlit Fund on all those channels, and you can find out more. We will find out more there about our past Greenlit U sessions of education. They're all up on our YouTube channel, and the future ones we have coming up, including when we set the dates for Ian's one. Marvelous. Katie, plug your channels.
So we are at Festival Formula on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I recommend that you come and give us a follow, because we're a really good resource for, first of all, seeing what films that we take on. We announce everyone that joins our slate, but also every selection that we get for our clients, we do announce, so you can kind of begin to see and learn about different festivals that perhaps you do know or don't know, but also you begin to see what types of films that they're selecting too. We are traveling, we're back on the road again, so we are kind of back at international festivals. But just looking at our slate on our page on our website, you'll begin to see, I mentioned assets earlier. We have two ways of looking at content on our slate page on the website. The first is by genre, and the second is by themes and assets. And you will begin to see that some of the things that you can really exploit in your film really do benefit its circuit journey. So I do recommend that, and signing up to our newsletter.
Yep.
I will also give a shout out to something that we are doing collectively as part of Barnes Film Festival, which is we're doing a networking event, which is, I should know the date, is June the 17th. And it's at Riverside Studios. Essentially, it's the opportunity to be in a room in person, yay! And we've got Greenlit, Performance Insurance, and Genera Films as special guests. And just found out today we've got some guests from Film 4, as well as Coots Wealth Management too. So come down. It's I think it's £8, but you get to be in a room with lots of people and have a nice time networking.
Yeah. Definitely, it's a good one. We've done it online for the last couple of years, haven't we?
We have, yeah.
It's
so
not quite the same, so I'm
No.
looking forward to this one. Looking forward to it very, very much indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's everything. Thank you so much for coming along. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Katie, for an absolutely wonderful session.
No worries. Thank you.
See you soon. Happy festivaling.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye.